What is an RTD? First off, RTD stands for Round Table Discussion. It's a videotape panel discussion hosted by doremicom, co-hosted by SolidSmurf, where we take a wargaming topic, force the panel to analyze wargaming trends, force the panel to answer at least 6 questions, then ask them to make an outlandish prediction about the future. Oh, and I forgot to mention the most difficult thing. Take away the round table, force them to use video chat software that rarely works, and be entertaining. The Round Table Discussion. Bringing the what to wargaming. Hey guys, welcome back to the WargamePainting channel. We're here with Season 4, Episode 5 of the RTD, titled Trending the Tabletop Hobby. The tabletop wargaming hobby has been around for quite a few years. If we take note of particular elements year over year, we can see a necessary trending curve forming. Do these trends help to identify the future of tabletop gaming, or do they open the door for competition to fill a gap left as the trends become more extreme? Before we can answer that question, we need to look at the trends themselves. This episode will attempt to chart the course of the big ship we all know as the tabletop wargaming hobby. The questions being asked are from the standpoint of the overall tabletop wargaming genre and will be difficult to answer since there may be a chasm between games going in multiple directions. And with me today are my panel, John from WargamePainting.
Hello.
Can't be in all of them if you're not in the first 5. And then SolidSmurf.
I'm in the jungle.
And lastly, our guest panel member.
So jealous.
And lastly, our guest panel member, Jennifer from Sci-Fi Genre.
Good to be here.
Excellent. All right, let's go and jump into question number 1. Question number 1 is, using a 10-point scale, 1 being army model counts are shrinking rapidly to 10 being army model counts are increasing rapidly. That means for a particular army list that you see on a board, is the number of models in that army list declining or increasing? What is the trend we are seeing in regards to army size of tabletop war games? And to start this off, we're going to start with SolidSmurf, the co-host.
I'm going big and going with a 9. They're getting huge. I mean, I'm seeing the trend of point costs are going down on individual models, but people don't want to play smaller games, so they want to play that 1,500-point game. They want to play that 25-point game. So they're having to increase the amount of models they have, thus growing bigger armies.
All right, John, how about your thoughts on this?
I gave it a 4 because as much as the collection that somebody has might be growing exponentially, the size of every army, I think, is getting smaller. And we can see that with the 40K to Privateer Press to Infinity scale, where it went from like 50 models to 6 models to 3 models. So while you might collect more models, your still individual armies are decreasing in size.
Excellent point. Jennifer, what's your thoughts on the question?
I went with a 6 on this one. I feel that the new editions of 40K and Fantasy are really expecting people to put more models on the table. But at the same time, I feel like there's still a lot of competition in a skirmish market where, Infinity and similar games are coming in and really allowing you to play competitive games with 5 to 10 models. So while I think the bigger games are kind of growing, especially Games Workshop and Privateer, I'm not sure that the hobby as a whole is growing.
I gave this question a 6. I think that while it's true that it seems like every game is slowly increasing the range of their miniatures, and in order for the players to actually take advantage of the new models that exist in every single individual game, they're increasing the number of models that you can field in a particular table. I'm going to continue here. So it goes back to my answer of being a 6 because, like Jennifer said, that the industry, as games continue to grow in size, new guys are coming in at the lower model count range to attract interest into it, and it's keeping the huge genre as a whole from shifting too much, even though if we looked at each individual game, I think the number would be closer to a 7. Continued discussion. continue the discussion?
I'm right, as always.
Smurf with the extreme answer is right. John, so I noticed you're the only person who actually said that they're actually decreasing in size. I mean, and granted, I'm looking at it from your perspective of game over game as new games are being introduced. There does tend to be that shift towards more of a squad-based game. Can you fill in a little bit more as to why you said 4?
Well, I didn't want to say it was like middle of the road because I feel like the games that are coming out, like Malifaux, and all these games are really kind of oriented around you just getting into them and starting with a really small model count. Whereas like 40K and Fantasy, you actually have to have a decent amount of models to jump into them. I feel like that the scale is just shifting past that halfway mark down into the bottom of the barrel as far as model counts go. I couldn't give it a 3 or anything less because, I mean, there are still a huge basis of people who play 40K and Fantasy. And with the rumors about 6th edition being totally infantry-based, that number is going to probably go up. But the way it is right now, I see it as that really just past the halfway mark of model count.
But even with those smaller games, John, do you still see that the model counts individually in each particular game aren't increasing? Like with a game like War Machine, which we've played.
Right.
I mean, I guess I kind of agree with Smurf with the whole notion of you start in the game, you get 15 points, but you still want to keep, ever increasing in that 30-point range and seeing silliness go on with 100-point games that last 4 days.
I feel like that comes down to just personal willingness to invest in the hobby, where the game itself is set up for that low model count, low point value games, where they trying to encourage that, I feel. Where they're like, here's a starter box, and you can literally play with 4 guys. I mean, for my War Machine army, I have the starter box and a Nightmare, and that's all I have in it. It's not that I don't like the models, it's not that I don't like the game, it's just that's all I've ever felt compelled to buy. And the game rewards you for playing that, because when I go to Thursday night War Machine nights at my game store, everybody's playing Battle Box or just slightly over, and my Nightmare puts me over that limit. So, I mean, I feel like the game itself is oriented for smaller point games, whereas it encourages people with models, or maybe you bought the wrong stuff at the very beginning and you want to buy more stuff. I don't feel like that need to buy more stuff is actually the root of the game having more or less miniatures. It's you're choosing to add. I'm having a hard time.
No. I think you're fine, and we'll probably cut you off at some point.
Yeah, but I feel like, okay, so like the soundbite version is you're choosing to buy more models. It's not that you have to buy more models.
Gotcha. Jennifer, anything? Sorry, Smurf, didn't mean to step on you. Jennifer, you got anything to add before we continue on to question 2?
Just to touch on what John was saying really briefly, I think that for all of us, when you get really enthusiastic about a game, there's that urge to put more models on the table. And I know when I was playing Confrontation, it was always, they come up with a 400-point model for a game that's supposed to have 400 points in an army, and you're like, oh, but I want to play it. I really want to play it. And the next thing you know, you're trying to field 1,000-point armies. So I think there's sort of an enthusiasm thing that goes on there where people just keep buying and want to put them on the table, so they have to come up with rules so you can do that.
Smurf, you got anything extra before we jump on to question 2?
Shouldn't a game maker want you to buy more models? Shouldn't they create a world in a game that you want to buy? Not that you have to, that you want to. And that's how you get a fan base in a game. You get people that want to invest into it, not that they have to. And I think that's what a lot of game companies are doing wrong.
And I think that
you just proved my point right there, where you just said that you want to buy more models. You don't have to buy more models.
Right.
You can play
but
with
back
3
to the
models,
original question.
But you want to buy 100.
Right, but the question was, what is the games doing right now? I think overall they're increasing in size, not because they want to, but because the game makers are forcing them.
But if we were applying Smurf's 9 to that question, we'd probably have to sell off certain body parts in order to keep up with that kind of speed of army growth. Let's go ahead and continue on to question number 2. Question number 2 is, Using a 10-point scale, 1 being dramatic shrink in size for an individual model, 10 being a massive increase in size on an individual model in the wargaming world, what trend are we seeing in regards to individual model sizes in tabletop war games? And for this, we're going to go ahead and start off with John from WargamePainting.
Okay, I went on the other side of the halfway mark with this one. I went with a 6, mainly because the overall size of the miniatures I think are staying relatively the same for like infantry and vehicle-based stuff, but they're coming out with these new super models in every game. They're coming out with like the Tower of Everblight and the giant Necromonicon thing for vampire counts and the dragons and all that stuff. They're coming out with these really cool centerpieces that are huge, but the relative scale of everything else is staying the same. So it's slightly shifting up there, but not really noticeably.
All right, Jennifer, what's your thoughts on this?
John stole my answer. I'm going to go with 6 as well. I completely agree that it seems like back in the day when I got started, one of your Warhammer codexes would describe this gigantic model, right? And you could like glue it together out of like some popsicle sticks and whatever you have laying around and put it on the field, and there were rules for it. But now, like, it's like Games Workshop and Privateer got wise, and they're like, oh, we could charge people like $100 for these. And there's totally demand for them. And so I think it's really cool to see stuff like the Hellpit Abomination coming out. And as John mentioned, you've got the Kador gun carriage and things like that coming out from Privateer. But again, the scale of these games is not really changing. I think the scale is based on what is comfortable to field on the size of the table you want to play on. And that's why for massive war games like Flames of War, you have 15 millimeter scale. And for these more heroic war games, you're going to have 28 millimeter. I don't really see that changing.
Smurf, which thoughts?
I gave it a 7. I'm sticking with the trend here. We do have the bigger stuff, the colossals, the battle engines. Look at Warhammer Fantasy when you have, not only do you have these giant creatures and beasts, but you actually have terrain that your wizards ride around on now. I mean, they're introducing these bigger things, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think it's kind of cool. They're realizing that we can go big. We can do cool stuff like that. It's not always a good idea, though, when you can't transport it easily, i.e. Dark Eldar Raiders.
Right.
I mean, who thought that was a good idea?
All right. I'm going to give you my 2 cents. I actually say it's a 6, just like John and Jennifer. And just like Jennifer said, everyone stole my answer as well. The reality is that individual models are still coming out the same size as they always were for the game that you're playing. However, there is that trend to latch on to one-off type models like the War Machine Colossuses that are coming out, and the thing that's crazy about it is that when I first started looking at this question, I actually wanted to jump to a 7 or an 8, but I started realizing that it had more to do with the fact that the media, the publicity, anything that you actually see coming out of these types of companies that build the games is really focused on these new models, and that's why it seems like that's occurring. But for every one Colossus that comes out, you're going to have another, 10 or 15 units, for instance, for War Machine that are in the same scale that the game has always been in. Since we all kind of agreed, not quite sure that we need a further discussion, but wanted to open the floor. Oh, we do.
I'm
Smurf,
excited
jump in
about
there.
this. As a painter, I mean, this is cool. Getting, a big old colossal that looks like a giant steampunk robot that I can display next to my computer screen and just be like, I'm going to call you Little Ricky, or something like that. It's exciting. It's nice to see, even though I absolutely hate it and I think it's dumb, it was cool to see Games Workshop kind of branch out a little bit and do Dreadfleet, that they were like, we're going to try something new and do a different type of model. That drive should never be lost in a business, that willingness to change what you're doing and try something new. I think it's important, and I think it's exciting, and I want more. I want a lot more.
All right. Any other continued discussion?
Yeah. I got to agree with Smurf. I've had my Greater Demon of Bloodthirster thing, as my centerpiece that I just like carry around with me and I set on my desk everywhere that I go. Like I had it at work with me for a while. Like the thing is awesome and it's huge. And people come in and they're like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Oh, I painted that." They're like, "No, you didn't." I'm like, "Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. That's mine." So, I mean, I thoroughly agree. And it's just, the effect is lost when you have something like this big compared to something less big.
Yeah.
So I agree that I love the bigger things. I'm not sure that a bigger everything is a good idea. I like having centerpieces that don't detract from each other. Because if you have four giant things on your side, everything else is irrelevant. Everybody's going to like these, and then it's going to be, which one do I like? And nobody's going to be able to pick. So one or two really cool big guys I like.
Well, and I consider the army transfers you're going to need for 4 of those in your army, right? I mean, everyone will be rolling around with the biggest suitcase they can find because they simply can't afford all of the, nice high-profile bags in order to transport these huge models. So if they ever did it where it was that big and you had to have a massive army of them, first off, I hope you have a car big enough. Anyone with a hatchback, can't play.
I mean, how nervous is it when you see the guy walk in with the model that has a CD-sized base, and he's got his game bag under one arm, and he's carrying the other thing, and you're just like, don't sneeze, don't drop it. And you just see it teetering around as he walks across through the maze of nerds, and you're just like, this is not going to end well.
Please don't let anyone get really excited about something that happened on a Magic card game, and you go woo and boom, knock that model right out of the guy's hand. Yeah, that'd be bad.
The more I think about it, the more I'm not sure we're seeing a trend here at all, though, because sure, this year Games Workshop and Privateer have gotten together and decided to do some huge models, but if you go back to Rackham when they were doing Confrontation, they were doing these gigantic centerpieces the whole time, and it's silly to bring Wizards of the Coast to a wargaming discussion, but I'll go ahead and be that person and say that they were doing these gigantic dragons that you could use in your D&D minis games for years, where the idea was you build a whole army and played against the dragons. So it seems like this is a really recent trend, but I'm actually not sure that this isn't just sort of a cycling through of something that happens every few years.
And I'll even pull in another one, and John might call it a girly game, and I don't care. With HeroClix, they're bringing out their giant models. I mean, they have models that are literally 1.5 feet tall, and they have 25 clicks on the base, and it's really cool to see the X-Men going up against some Guardian of the Universe or whatever, and you're reenacting some battle from the comic book, and you're just like, yes, this is amazing, and Wolverine gets obliterated, and, cool things like that happen. And John, I don't need a rebuttal from you, but I think it's cool.
I wasn't going to say it's a girly game. I was going to say it's a child's game. But, no, I mean, pulling in even from the current range, I mean, you see, old metal Terminators to the new plastic ones. There's a good difference in size on those guys. So, I mean, again, we're not really seeing so much as a trend as just bigger centerpieces, I think. So.
Would you consider Terminator centerpieces? I don't really, but I would agree that
for $50,
bigger,
yes.
But I mean, you have Baneblades now, and the old Land Raider compared to the new Land Raider, or the old High Elf Dragon compared to the new High Elf Dragon. I mean, these things are getting huger, but your Marines are staying relatively the same size. Yes, huger. If you can't find a word, you make one up, and huger is my word of the day.
Okay, guys, this is actually one of the first times in RTD history that we've actually had people kind of go back and forth on what their answer is. So please, if you guys are watching this episode, write down in the comments what you guys think specifically about this question number 2. I'm really curious to see how you guys sit on the fence on this. And with that, we're going to go ahead and jump on to question number 3. Question number 3 is... using a 10-point scale, 1 being much smaller to 10 being at least tripling the size or quantity of rule books. What trend are we seeing in regards to either size, quantity, and in addition, the difficulty of rules in tabletop wargaming? And for this, we're going to start off with our brand new panel member. Jennifer, you're on the block.
All right, I think this is a hard one. I think that you can't deny that every new Games Workshop edition that comes out, it seems like you have to buy more and more rulebooks, and that the rulebooks themselves, especially the core editions, are bigger and bigger. They're getting stuff with more fluff, more photographs, more painting guides, and I'm not really sure what the motivation is there, because everybody has to have a rulebook to play the game, and so I wonder, are you just increasing the barrier to entry when you do that? And I think that also games want to be able to change their rules more fluidly, and as a result, they publish these rule supplements that give you new rules options and things like that. So I'm going to have to go with a 7 on this one.
All right. Definitely increasing. Smurf, you're up.
I went with a 7 as well, because things are getting thick, books are getting thicker, they're getting bigger, but they're not necessarily getting more rules. It seems like the rules section stays about the same, but the other crud that just increases the price of the book gets thicker, and then they charge more. But it's not necessarily a good thing. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, sorry. John, you're up.
I really wanted to give this a 1, but with GW increasing the size of all their rule books, I had to give it a 2. Mainly because we're seeing everything go to PDF. We're seeing everything go to cards. Privateer Press, you have cards. You carry that around in your back pocket. PDFs, I carry that around on my phone. I mean, literally, there is no reason in some of these newer games to even carry rule books with you unless you want to feel the book. So I really think that we're seeing a drop down dramatically. And coming up with my own game system, the first thing that everybody told me was PDF versions of everything. PDF core rulebook, PDF codexes, access on your phone. Because you know what? You will lose money, but in the long run, people will be more satisfied with going to your website, downloading it for free, getting time to mull it over, and then buying your figures. And then if the really diehard fans want to buy the books, you have that as an option. But really, I think we will be seeing a paperless version of tabletop games really soon.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and jump here. I actually don't think it is as aggressive as John was saying. I think the answer really is about a 3, and we are seeing a simplification in the rules. Even throughout the entire length of Warhammer history, it appears that year over year, more times than not, you have a simplification of the rules, a consolidation of the rules, and while you do have this increased size of the actual books themselves, when you look at what constitutes the rules in the individual books, you don't really see an increase in size there. It's just them trying to justify the higher expense that they want to charge for Codex A, B, C, C1, C2, because there's multiple editions of the same Codex, particular in any potential edition of the game system. But if you look outside of GW, especially some of these newer games, the rules are either really small, providing a quick entry into the game system itself, or B, much like John was talking about, they're compartmentalized, and this is where the electronic space can really help us a great deal. Wikis provide much better access to rule systems than the core rule books themselves, and in those games where the size of the rules might not seem to be decreasing, the amount of rules you have to learn for your particular army have decreased. And with that, I'm going to open up the floor for further discussion.
I don't think it'll ever go totally digital. I really don't. Because there's diehard people like me that loves the smell of books. I would much rather have a book in my hand. And I know that sounds counterproductive, but there's something about holding it, be able to read it while you're in the bathroom, sleep with it, whatever you want to do with your book. There's something about having it it's nostalgic. I like it.
I don't disagree with you at all, Smurf. I am one of those guys who always have books, but it's a lot easier to turn on my phone and be like, find blah, blah, and then it scans through the entire document and pulls it up. There's blah, blah, and you show it to your opponent, and you're like, you are wrong. Sit down. It's so much easier, and I feel like the technology is there, and people will want to take advantage of that, because as much as I would like to have that $49.50 awesome hardbound full color fantasy rulebook that they have for Empire and Vampire Council and all that stuff, I don't particularly care if I just want the rules if they're on my phone and it's not in a hardback format. I mean, there's a difference between necessity and want, and really necessity-wise, you can get away with it on your phone. Want-wise, again, it comes down to player perspective and what you really want. And if you want to spend the $50 on the book, hey, that's me. I'm going to buy the book. I have that awesome limited edition 40K 5th edition rule book with the seal on the front of it that opens up 25 times and it's got this huge mural on the inside. Yeah, I bought that because it's awesome. But not everybody else would.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, but I would say that especially if you look at newer games like Infinity, where quite literally you don't actually need the rule book. Everything is actually provided to you online and done in a way where you have such a flexibility. They even right now, they just released the Jodam tag, and it looked like on their website that they actually changed some of the stats of the tag itself, and they're able to release it right away, have it be built into the Devil team working on their army builder, make sure that it's available on their wiki, make sure that it's in their online rule books immediately. And that kind of freshness to the concept of making sure that your game system works consistently and correctly. So in the case of so in the case of someone who, let's say, creates a Space Wolf Codex and they realize, whoa, this is just going to introduce way too many FAQs. Why don't we make some corrections right now on the spot? And I think that's where you're going to finally start seeing the digital drive to move away from hardback, which unfortunately, you don't have the flexibility of having your book be modified on the spot when corrections really and truly need to be in place. All right, guys, this is the conclusion of part 1 of episode 4 of season. No. This is the conclusion of part backwards. This is the conclusion of part 1 of season 4, episode 5, trending in the tabletop space, and we'll be back shortly with part 2. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this happens every time. Okay. Hello, does. Everyone. Yeah, it does. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to WargamePainting channel.
To interrupt you.
Stop,
you have to do it again.
Smurf. I will mute you if I have to. I will cut you completely out of this episode. You were never here. All right.